Why communism failed and liberal democracy prospered, the Human Prosperity Project. There are a lot of reasons why Soviet-style communism failed. But I was reading the description here to decide if this would be worth going over, being it's only 2 minutes long. Liberal democracy triumphs where communism fails because it, and I assume the it here is referring to liberal democracy. This is why you don't split your infinitives, people. It limits the government's ability to make important decisions on behalf of its citizens. Communism undermines individual choice by putting government power before individual rights. Liberal democracy successfully balances individual rights with majority rule. By respecting and protecting equality and fundamental rights, liberal democracy allows humans to thrive. So I can already tell from this description that I am going to disagree with everything in this video. Let's find out. And once again, I have not watched, as you saw, there was about 2 or 3 seconds. That was what loaded before I could pause it when I loaded up the video.
Karl Marx claimed that communism would inevitably triumph over liberal democracy. Yet during the 20th century, liberal democracies delivered unprecedented freedom and wealth to their citizens, while communist countries decayed into impoverished dictatorships. Why did communism fail?
So, I would not consider the CCP either communism or liberal democracy. They're not really a democracy, and they're really not liberal. And they're definitely not communism. But China is one of the wealthiest nations on the planet. I mean, that wealth is almost entirely concentrated at the top, and most of the people live in tiny tenements and shoebox apartments. But that's not communism's fault, because there's no communism there. There's no socialism there. That's capitalism's fault. And also, this is another issue I see a lot of people make. This conflation of socialism or communism as being opposed to liberal democracy or just democracy. Remember, this is how the Cold War was presented to people. We have to make the world safe for democracy and safe from communism. That implies that communism is incompatible with democracy, and nothing could be further from the truth. Socialism, communism, is at its core democratic. But they didn't want to talk about economy. Because if you actually look at the economies of places like China, Cuba, the old USSR, you see that despite their socialist names, their economies are similar to ours. They may not have as big or as free of a market, but it's still the same. It also, by treating it this way, you get people to conflate the ideas of communism equals dictatorship. It equals authoritarianism. It equals no choice. Everything is controlled by the government. You don't have any choice even in where you work or live. And while that may be how it works in China, in the Soviet Union, how it works in North Korea, maybe in Cuba, that's not the principles of socialism that are causing that. That is the authoritarian rule of Marxist-Leninists or Maoists. Dengists, actually, in China these days.
And liberal democracy prosper. First, unlike communism, liberal democracy successfully balances individual rights with majority rule. This allows liberal democracies to...
Proof? Because right now in America, we have a party who is in charge of 2/3 of the... Really, they're in charge of half the legislative body, the executive power, and essentially the conservatives are in charge of the judicial branch as well. So it's fair to say that the conservative Republican Party controls 75% of our government. Like, I think in broad strokes we can all agree on that, right? So how is it that this is the case despite the fact that Republicans frequently get fewer votes than Democrats? In the biggest, most powerful, best liberal democracy in the world, the United States of America, in many places in this country, your vote is fucking worthless because there's enough other people who disagree with you who are able to get the power, or you just live in a sufficiently gerrymandered area, so what you want doesn't matter. So right off the bat, we've got a hell of a whopper.
To pass laws that
And once again, socialism is a way of organizing the economy that necessarily can influence how the social and political structures are built in a given place. But the very strictures of socialism promote both individual rights and collective rights.
reflect the preferences and judgments of the people, while preserving individual freedom and equality under the law. Second,
in theory at least,
communism tasks government officials with making most decisions about economics, society, and politics. In other words, the government makes decisions on behalf of its people in every major area of life. Liberal democracies,
as opposed to at least the US model of liberal democracy, where the decisions are made by wealthy oligarchs and we have no input either way. Funny that.
on the other hand, believe that individuals, whatever their flaws, are generally better able to act in their own interests and give them the right to make those choices.
Oh boy. I really loathe capitalist propaganda. Not gonna lie. Because the problem with capitalism as it exists today, now if this is what Adam Smith intended when he theorized capitalism, who knows? But under capitalism, especially this kind of neoliberal, hyper-market-driven capitalism, where everything is a market, then everything is a commodity. And so people don't have the right or opportunity. In theory, they have the right, but they don't have the opportunity or ability to truly pursue what they want to do. I mean, I've said it before on stream, I'm not making any income right now. I'm fortunate to be in a position where, at least for the time being, I can pursue what I want to do, which is this right here talking with you folks every day, without worrying about how I'm going to eat. Now, that situation is not going to continue indefinitely, but hopefully I'll be having an income before I have to stop doing this. And that is under capitalism. Under the theories of socialism, at least as I understand them, we can create a society where everyone's housing, food, basic food, clothing, and healthcare, the big four. Clothing, housing, food, and medical care are the human rights they're considered to be. Okay, I'll be honest, I don't really consider clothing a human right. I think everyone should just be naked. But you get what I mean. With those things as the human rights, considered the human rights that they are, and with society structured to be the human rights that they are, and with ideally an economy that does not pursue the profit motive at all, but at least considers it secondary to the health and happiness of the workers, we create a society where people don't have to work 40 to 60 to 80 hours a week just to make sure they can stay alive. Because that's the situation in America right now. For the vast majority of workers in America, they can't afford, basically it's that old saying, when you got the money, you ain't got the time. When you got the time, you ain't got the money. Why? Well, because under capitalism, we're required to work just to eat. Now, I want to make it clear that under socialism, you would still need to work, because that's the whole theory of it. That's the whole idea, is that individuals work, and as part of that work, they receive a life. And I know that there is some discussion, well then why would anyone work if you just get a house and food and everything, you need? And I hope that this quarantine helps to provide specific experiential counterpoints to that. Because the reason why, under normal circumstances, someone who gets some time off work just spends it sleeping or playing video games or just laying around watching Netflix, or even, what does everybody want to do when they get off work, right? They want to go home, maybe have a beer or two or smoke a bowl, and play your video game of choice or watch whatever you're currently binging on Netflix. It's because work sucks. especially the mode of work that most people engage in America. So we can make allowances for so-called free riders in an anarchist or socialist system, because human production and efficiency has gotten so good that I think I've read that we could maintain a solid standard of living for every human on the planet with something like 10 to 15 hours of work a week. Like, each person has to work 15 hours a week. However, that would be divided up. It would be like 2 8-hour days, and then you've got the other 5 days of the week to fuck around and do whatever. If that's 3 hours of work 5 days a week, if that's, 1 4-hour, if that's like 3 4-hour days and a 3-hour day, however it's organized, it doesn't fucking matter. What matters is that the 40-hour work week, which was proposed a century ago, was originally meant as a starting point, and as we got more efficient, as technology improved, as more people entered the workforce, as technology made work easier, we could reduce the hours we worked. Instead, they just expected more out of the hours worked, and eventually just stopped increasing our pay along with it. So, when they say that liberal democracy lets you choose what you want to do, that is only true for a select number of people. For people who are fortunate enough to be able to go to a good enough school that it encourages them to go on to college, and that they are able to get the financial assistance they need or can afford to pay to go to college to get your job that you want. Whether it's a painter or a doctor or a researcher or a pilot or whatever. Under socialism, you would be required to perform some sort of labor to help society, but then you would have the rest of the time to pursue whatever you wanted to, and without the profit motive, without money being the driving factor of society. Because make no mistake, in America in 2020, the most important thing is money. It's not health, it's not life, it's not love, it's not people, it's not computers or data, it's money. If we remove that as the primary driving force in America and just make the most important thing, which is human happiness and contentment, then it gives people free time. And more importantly, it means that you don't have to pursue a hobby as a side hustle. Like, I honestly enjoy being on here talking with people, but I'm so nervous most of the time about making sure that I get my presentation right, making sure that everything looks good and sounds good, so that maybe people will enjoy it and want to follow, so I get good in the algorithm. I spend hours editing videos so that they look better and sound better, so that more people will want to click on them and recommend them to their friends. I spend hours making sure that what I'm talking about is good and valid, so that maybe people will want to donate to me or sign up to my Patreon or whatever the case may be, or follow me on Twitch so that they know when I go live, so they want to talk about it. No, I just want to do this so that people want to hear what I say. But because money is such the driving force in our society, all of our hobbies have to also be side hustles. And if you remove the profit motive, then there's no need to worry about it being a side hustle. Just what you do for fun. There's a lot of awesome paintings, sculptures, drawings, what have you, that exists in the minds of people who are like, I don't know how to paint, so no one would want to buy it, so what's the point?
Finally, while Marx argued that social and political disharmony would vanish under communism, liberal democracies are grounded in a more pragmatic and realistic understanding of human nature. They recognize that while humanity is capable of cooperation and devotion to justice, human beings also have unique wants and needs that are bound to lead to conflict. As a consequence, liberal democracies design political institutions to constrain the passions and mitigate the biases of the people and their elected representatives.
I feel like I need to mention, for Check's notes, the 17 billionth time that communism has never existed. So whatever Marx thought would exist under a communist leadership, under a communist society, we have no empirical evidence of whether he was right or not, because there's never been a communist society on Earth. Been very close. Paris Commune was almost communist, but there was still some class lines, and I believe they still used a form of currency. The definition of communism is a stateless, classless, moneyless society. This means that there is no differentiation between people based on their income, because there is no income. There's no money. And that's one of the reasons why I don't think we'll get communism on Earth for hundreds of years. I think we can make progress, but I don't think that we are going to get true communism on Earth, for the plain and simple fact that money is so ingrained in how we value things, both time and physical objects. And it's honestly such a good method for abstracting the value of something. As the video we watched earlier this week that didn't seem to have a point pointed out, how do you, say I'm a carpenter. I make cabinets and chairs and tables, and I can repair your roof or your wall or what have you. And let's say I need food, okay? I can build anything I want, but I can't eat wood. I'm not a beaver. I know beavers don't actually eat wood, don't at me. So I go off to town. I go to the market. And, oh, hey, there's Alphonse, my favorite pie baker. And I say, Alphonse, hey, I've got a new table I've built that is wonderful craftsmanship. I'm sure you'll love it. Can I trade it for, say, a week's worth of meat pies? I'm sorry, my friend, I do not need any more meat pie. I do not need any more table. I have no room in my home. I have no room in my business. All my tables are fine. What about chairs? I'm sorry, I don't need any chairs. Well, you need something repaired? Maybe you need... And obviously there are complex chains where you can trade a table to the weaver to get a bolt of cloth that the baker needs for his wife, or what have you. There are complex... But you know what's so much simpler and easier? Is to sell your table to someone for some amount of currency, and then go to the baker and say, 1 meat pie, please, here's $1. It's so much simpler, so much easier, and as long as everyone agrees on the value of the product sold, which, honestly, for goods that are not necessary to life, markets are pretty decent at regulating prices. Well-regulated markets, then it's much simpler and easier to have money. So if we continue to define communism as requiring a moneyless society, I don't think we'll ever get there. But I'm certain we can eliminate class and states in a century or two. So, again, this is conflating an economic system with a socio-political system. There's no reason whatsoever that a socialist government couldn't, and I'm just going to go ahead and find and replace communists and socialists in this person's argument. There's no reason to believe that a socialist government couldn't also create a 3-branch system of checks and balances like we have in America, like many places in the world have.
Ultimately, liberal democracy begins with the premise that human beings are born equally, with fundamental rights that governments must respect and protect. It is this foundation that allows individuals to thrive personally, politically, and economically.
Implying that socialism doesn't believe that people are born and are equal. Wow. Talk about implying an argument without saying anything. Okay, that's it. Yeah. Wow. Ooh, boy, I'm verbose. 26 minutes on a 2-minute video. I am good. So, yeah. I feel like I said a lot there to dispute this 2-minute video. Because that's basically what it is. He doesn't believe that he is conflating an economic system with a political system. And there's nothing about socialism that makes it impossible to exist in a democratic system. I mean, we could easily create socialism. Let me clarify what I mean by easily. We could create a socialist economic system in America without really doing a whole lot to our government structure. Now, this is ignoring all of the material conditions which prevent socialism, namely the billionaire oligarchs who largely control our government. So when I say we could easily create, I mean that we wouldn't have to completely restructure everything from the ground up for how the government is for how the system is supposed to work. For instance, if we could just say, okay, all existing workplaces and locations are communally owned by the workers and, operate the people who work there. And all the owners, if they want to continue having an income, have to, they have a position available at the place they previously owned, otherwise they would have to go somewhere else. This is why one of the major differences with socialism is that abolition of private property. Because that's one of the major issues, I will confess, it is a major issue with worker co-ops. It can be difficult to expand. If you have a worker co-op with 5 people, each of you own 20% of the co-op. You all reap 20% of the profits of the organization. You all reap 20% of the labor. But let's say you want to expand. And let's say that the expansion is natural and not just a product of capitalist requirement for constant growth. Well, now you either have to make sure that the 4 or 5% loss each person loses by bringing on another person, because now it's divided 6 ways, so you get, what is that, about 17%? That it's made up for by the increase from that one person being added, or you get into the situation where you're hiring an employee and it's no longer a worker co-op. Whereas if we simply had workplaces that did the thing and we didn't worry about who owned them because they're just collectively owned by the people in that community, then we don't need to worry about who owns what or how things are split up. Like, a lot of people think that socialism would increase economic complexity. It wouldn't. True implemented socialism where there is no private property, and again, private property is property owned by a person for non-personal use. So a factory, a bus, a call center, these would all be private property and impossible to own under socialism. You can still own your car, you can still own your home. Again, this is where we get into, I think there would be strong anti-inheritance laws under socialism. Or there would not be the expectation that a house would necessarily get passed on to one's descendants. Simply because, as someone who is set to inherit a home from his father when he dies, hopefully not soon, I don't think it's fair, even in a society where owning a home isn't that big a deal, to be able to say, you are the fruit of my loins, so you get to benefit from this home that someone else built and maybe I paid for. He inherited it from his parents. I mean, he's still paying on it, but, he's paying it on a 20-year-old loan. So, yeah, he's got a real good deal. So, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that when you conflate and erroneously compare liberal democracy, which apparently is inherently capitalist, and socialism, yeah, they're not going to compare very well. But if you compare the real comparison, which is socialism and capitalism, well, one of those comes out way ahead. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you liked it, like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you. See you next time.